Now I'd like to introduce our second speaker, Kelly McKenzie. Over 6 years ago, Kelly founded White Bear Studio with the goal of creating beautiful branding with attitude and effective results. Under her creative direction, our award-winning agency has grown year on year and expanded across 2 countries. In her career, Kelly has worked with diverse clients, including government bodies, large corporates and SMEs, in sectors ranging from food, drink, and retail to financial services and tech. She has worked with Deloitte, Nestle, Unilever, Diageo, Red Bull, Ford, American Express, and Microsoft. Welcome, Kelly.
Hi, how's it going, Audrey? Long time no see. Can you hear me all right?
Yep, we can hear you.
Brilliant, great. Hi, everybody. If I could just ask Emma to stop sharing, then I'm going to share my screen. Emma, thank you so much for that. I thoroughly enjoy working with Emma. I've been working with her for a number of years and I'm always learning something new. So that there's no exception to tonight. I've taken a lot away. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Emma. I am now going to share my own screen. Okay, view full screen mode. Hoping everybody can see my screen. Okay, great. As Audrey introduced me, I am Kelly, the founder and the creative director of White Bear. A high level of what we do. We specialize in creating disruption for food and drink startups, scale-ups, and also big brands who need to now step it up in order to stay relevant. We help startups to achieve investment. We help challengers to scale up and build future-proof brands with killer propositions. And then we help the more established brands to adapt to this disruptive market and to think more like a challenger. So on to what I would like to talk about today. Emma's brought us through what Clean Label is and why it's so important and will continue to grow in importance. She also took us through and demonstrated how Kerry brings Clean Label to life and communicates it effectively in a B2B context. What I'd like to do now is to continue that conversation and speak about how brands can use design to bring Clean Label to life for consumers, and particularly how to use effective design in showcasing taste and appetite appeal in the context of Clean Label. So I want to start with some thought-provoking statistics. A study of consumers in the UK and the US showed the power of ingredients and brand in purchasing decisions. 51% chose ingredients lists as the most important attribute that motivated them to buy the product. 45% of consumers said brands motivated them to purchase. I'd like you to think now about how valuable it would be, or what would happen if you got both of these things right. I think you'll probably agree that the synergy is a powerful one, and I'll show you some examples here today and further widen it to show you how brand cues can be used to improve taste and appetite appeal, something that I see as a real opportunity in this space. You may have Clean Label ingredients, but you need to make people want to eat you. You also need that yummy factor. So before we talk about packaging specifically, I want to quickly talk a little bit about brand. Brand is the fundamental building block, and there's no point talking effective packaging until you get your brand right. Your brand's your foundation, and your packaging grows from your brand's values, story, visuals, and brand world. I've done other talks previously talking about how to create an effective brand story or a brand world, which we'll give links to at the end of this talk. But in the interest of today, I'm going to do a very high level recap and then get into the packaging. First up, you need to get your brand strategy right. A brand needs to be built on fundamentals and a robust brand strategy and story. Why? Well, because it's scientifically proven that humans remember stories more than they remember data. Think back to cavemen times, their stories were their currency, and it's really not that different from us today. Research shows that our brains are not hardwired to understand logic or retain facts for very long. I know mine myself definitely isn't. Our brains are wired to understand and retain stories. So we need to tell stories. We break a brand story further down into 5 things: your purpose, your mission, your vision, your value proposition, and your values. They're underpinned by a brand tone of voice as well. This is even more important in the clean label space, as consumers want to be part of something bigger, something that's contributing to a greater cause. Emma touched on this good for all, or the ethical values, and something that's beyond just their initial purchasing need. And our guest speaker later on, Richard from Ombar, is a great example of a cleaner brand being transparent about their mission to change the way you think about chocolate. I'm sure Richard will talk a little bit more about this later on, so I'll leave that to him. I'm going to briefly talk about these 5 elements at a high level to make sure we're just all on the same page. First up, I'll talk purpose. Purpose is your why. Why do you exist and why are you needed? Knowing your purpose will help differentiate you from your competitors. It's an opportunity to clearly and concisely let your potential stockists know the core of your business. If you are already a well-established brand, tapping back into what that core purpose is, what that driver is, will really help you to create meaningful content and campaigns. After you've nailed your purpose, you need to think about, well, what is your vision? How do you communicate that to your consumer? What drives you? What impact do you want to have? What do you want to change? Or what do you want to achieve? This is more aspirational than your purpose. But remember to be suitably ambiguous with it. Your vision needs to stand the test of time. Your service and your product may pivot and change and evolve. So don't limit yourself to a vision that will outdate in the first year. I always say don't make it monetary either. Something more aspirational. Once you have your purpose and your vision, really look at what's your mission. Your mission is the one that actually might change as your business grows and evolves. It's the easiest of the 3 to nail down. Your mission is how are you going to do it? It demonstrates your focus. It's the strategy that gets you to your vision. I always say picture yourself on a path. Your purpose is why you start off on that path and that adventure. Your vision is that end dream destination. Where do you want to get to? And your mission is that strategy of how you're going to get there. So when you have your purpose, your vision, and your mission, whether you're creating them from new or you're refreshing them to make sure that all of your activations, your NPDs, or your brand evolution stay relevant, you then need to think about how to tell that in a compelling way. We call that your value proposition. It summarizes your story in a sentence. A value proposition is a promise of value to be delivered, communicated, and acknowledged. An example of a great value proposition that's out currently is from Huel. It's so simple: real food, real taste, real nutrition. It really evokes trust and credibility. It's transparent and it's simple. It goes without saying that your purpose, vision, mission, and value proposition need to be underpinned by your brand's values. So another little note on this before we move forward. Brand values are at the core of a company's brand strategy. They're your brand's heartbeat and should underpin and permeate everything from branding to packaging to who you hire to how you ask your questions when you're interviewing somebody. And in the context of clean label, they're particularly important as consumers are looking for clean and green brands to live their values, not just talk about them. They're demanding action and they can see through you. If people believe they share values with the company, they'll stay loyal to the brand. Another interesting statistic, a lot of the brands that we work with are targeting millennials and Gen Zs. And something that we came across was that 61% of millennials believe brands are in a better place to make an impact on the world than governments. We need to tap into this. So once you have your brand strategy and your positioning, your value proposition, all of those key strategic elements in place, you then need to think about your brand world before you get onto your packaging. Your brand world is going to create all of those assets for you that you're going to implement in your packaging. So there's 3 things that we summarize a really effective and truly iconic brand down to. Ownable, Think back to how I mentioned what makes you different, and what can you trademark? What are your uniquely recognizable assets that you can own? Secondly, memorable. What's your story? What is the catch that's going to have that stickiness and stay in your consumer's mind? And thirdly, it needs to be scalable. It needs to be future-proofed for when you grow. If your name is too descriptive, that might limit you. If your brand is too reliant on, again, being too descriptive, then you can't scale and grow. You need to have room to pivot and evolve. To talk about each of these in a little bit, ownable means that you have ownable assets unique to your story. And when we say assets, I mean a combination of the logo mark, your handcrafted logo type, your imagery, your color palettes, your typography, your tone of voice, everything that goes into that brand toolkit to create your brand world. A great example of this is Ugly. Ugly tick all the boxes for me. They have handcrafted typography that's ownable. They own a color in their sector. They have an irreverent tone of voice that's instantly recognizable. They have a collection of all these cool little dudes and illustrations that again communicate this irreverent personality. And they also disrupt by putting water in a can rather than normally in a glass bottle. So they're ticking a lot of things in terms of ownability. We then move on to memorability. Having a clear brand story will help you to be memorable. Remember, consumers remember stories, not data. Functional MRI neuroimagery shows that when evaluating brands, consumers primarily use their emotions. Being memorable will build your customer loyalty and make it easier for you to track your brand's valuation. This may seem obvious, but it is a crucial part in the branding process to get your customers to keep coming back to you, especially if you're a challenger and some of those big brands are out there to replicate your products. A great example of a brand that is memorable is Hippies. Language and tone of voice can be used effectively to generate taste and appetite appeal and reiterate brand's values. I love Hippies as an example of this. Their tone of voice is super witty. It encourages consumers to give peas a chance and imagine living life in peas. I don't think I'd like to live life in peas, but it's quite fun. This creates a feeling of a movement that's bigger than the product and something that consumers want to be part of. They want to be part of a community. Married with their strong color palette that they're owning, it creates a feeling of tasty, progressive product that's different from its competitors. Moving on from being memorable is to be scalable. So taking the time to think about your story will help you to scale. Remember, I mentioned about your vision being suitably ambiguous. You need to future-proof your brand, so don't pin yourself down by having a name or an identity that confines you. You need flexibility. An example of a great brand that has flexibility to allow Callow to transcend different MPDs. Well, an example is Callow, I've just said it. Their brand is suitably ambiguous enough to allow them to transfer. However, what character traits they do collect is a feeling of naturalness, real food, authentic. So their brand language conjures up all of these emotions. However, they're not tied down by being too specific in their name or their communication. So to recap on the 3 pillars of a great brand, we need to be ownable, memorable, and scalable. And each of these tie back into that original brand story, which is your brand strategy and positioning. I mentioned that the brand world comprises of logo mark that can't be copied, logo type that is handcrafted and bespoke. It's not a generic typeface that can be copied. You have a brand language that runs through everything that you do, from iconography to illustration to copywriting and photography. So listing out some of those, I now want to dig deeper into that a little bit and talk about how to form effective packaging. Now that we've seen the power of the brand world, we turn to bring this to life on pack and communicate this in the context of clean label. Firstly, what is great packaging? Well, great packaging is explaining to your target audience, your consumer, both consciously and subconsciously, that the brand and product is something that answers their need, and doing so in a very short amount of time. It needs to stand head and shoulders above the competition, and simply put, we call this shelf shout. So how do we do this? Well, there's a number of tactical tools that we use in order to create packaging that communicates everything that we want to communicate. We break it down into brand block, taste or appetite appeal, tone of voice, color, imagery, and iconography. So I'm going to talk a little bit about each of these in the context of clean label. First up, we have brand block. I know Heinz is a massive brand, but their brand block is phenomenal. Using their tombstone shape across all of their products, they create instant memorability, and they're instantly recognizable. That, partnered with this turquoise that they're famous for, gives them strong shelf shout and will bring and will encourage brand loyalty. People want to know more about the story of your product. Your brand world needs to tell this. Yes, they want to know about features and benefits, which I will get to, but wider than that, they want to know about your origin story, the supply chain, your brand values, and your authenticity. Millennials and Gen Zs in particular want this information, and we need to get the hierarchy of this information right. We want to balance it. We call this our 12-foot, 6-foot, 1-foot rule. 12-foot is about brand block, 6-foot is about differentiating through SKUs, and 1-foot is about benefits and features. I'm going to dig into these in a little bit more detail. Often where brands get this wrong is by muddling up the hierarchy, where they're leading with benefits and features at the expense of their brand. This gives them no standout over competitors, as everyone else is talking about the same thing. So they're building up no brand loyalty. And if flavors have prominence over brand name, a consumer might buy your product on the strength of the SKU, but may then forget and not recognize your brand name the next time. Or if we own, or if an own brand develops a similar flavor to you, you might not have built up enough brand loyalty to keep them coming back to you. Our job is to get them to buy from you once as a brand agency, but your job is to get repeat business because you taste so great. Which leads me on to taste. Taste and appetite appeal is hugely important. It's a fact that when you get taste right on the front of your pack, it positively impacts your sales. As well as taste, another way to differentiate is through format. I always say Marshall McLuhan said it first, but the medium is the message. Every touch point needs to practice what you preach in terms of your brand values. If you value sustainability and clean label, it's critical your packaging underpins that and is in itself as clean and sustainable as possible. Format is also another great way to differentiate and disrupt. Can anyone tell me the name of these brands just by their format alone? People finding it difficult, perhaps? I don't think so. I think people are just not putting it in the chat box. I think that most of us will be able to, or maybe I'm not looking at the right chat box. Hang on. Yes, okay, great. Thanks. People are getting these right. Yes, okay. My chat box was slow to load. So everyone is getting all of these right, absolutely, because you can instantly recognize them from their format that differentiates them. So in the context of this talk, I want to ask, what's the clean label challenge? When fruit brands switch out ingredients for a cleaner version, the challenge is ultimately that the ingredients can serve the same purpose as the prior, less clean ingredient. Maybe it's shelf life for longer, freshness for longer, or a number of the other examples that Emma shared with us. So it can often be a straight swap, sometimes and often at more expense to the business. But the real benefit is the impact it has on our customer. Ultimately, it's healthier for you. When, for example, an ingredient based on a chemical is replaced with an ingredient based on, say, wheat, like Emma touched on earlier with upgrade, you need to communicate the impact that has on the end eater. You really need to communicate that it's better for the customer. Otherwise, not many people are going to look in detail at the ingredients list on the back of pack, and it may get lost and unnoticed as a benefit, thus not justifying its potentially higher price. That's where design is needed to help communicate that it's better for you. It's real food, it's real ingredients, not chemically enhanced. It has value. Its natural benefits need to be communicated on the front of pack or elsewhere, be it through iconography, point of sale, ad campaigns. It's a selling point that really shouldn't be undervalued. So now that we understand the challenge, well, what's the opportunity in clean label? For me, the opportunity, aside from communicating that clean ingredients are better for you, is taste and appetite appeal. There can be a stigma attached to cleaner brands that taste has been sacrificed at the expense of wholesomeness. And whilst design can't change the taste of a product, that's your job, it can impact the consumer perception of that taste and generate appetite appeal. I mentioned earlier our 12-foot, 6-foot, 1-foot rule. When looking at brands and packaging, we follow this with all of the brands that we work with. You can see from Eden here, a brand that we have that we worked on a while ago. At 12 foot, you look for some of that big stuff that I mentioned, like logo marks stand out on shelf and owning a color and disrupting the shelf with brand block. Now let's zoom in a bit further to 6 foot. At 6 foot, we can bring a brand to life through various means. I'll focus here on some key ones like tone of voice, secondary colors, and imagery. First up, let's talk a little bit about tone of voice. I might have mentioned earlier, but I always think a brand is like the gut feel you get when you meet somebody. It's that first impression. Do you trust them? Do you want them to be your mate? Do you want to hang out with them? Do you want to bring them home? And tone of voice acts in that way to form that conversation. And it's crucial that the brand tone of voice aligns with its brand values. I think one of the first brands to do this successfully was Innocent. They created such a unique, casual, naive, and playful tone of voice that we all fell in love with them, not to mention the fact that we trusted them. However, I'm not sure if you all agree, but I myself, I'm quite sick of walking into the supermarket aisles now and having all of the brands talking to me innocently. Hi, talk to me, pick me up, shake me, blah, blah, blah. I think that tone of voice has been overused and it's now time to disrupt and to do something different. But I really must admire Innocent for being pioneers in owning that tone of voice. Language is one of our key ways of communicating, and it's a powerful tool for clean label brands. It enables them to do a few things. Create a relationship with the customer and have them feel like they're part of something bigger and part of a conversation. Communicate brand values in a way that engages with the customer. We can be bolder here and communicate with clarity what we stand for. And we can create appetite appeal. Needless to say, brand language and tone of voice needs to be specific to the customer and the product. So you need to get the tone right. RX bars are an example of a very different tone of voice to Innocent. They subvert packaging norms by pinning their colors to the mast and stating their ingredients on the front of pack. They don't use descriptive words and instead rely on the clean packaging and muted colors to communicate their taste appeal. Now, I would argue that they would benefit as a brand by following the 12-foot, 6-foot, 1-foot rule. I myself instantly recognize these guys on shelf, but I would forget their name, to be honest. I never know them as RX bars. I know them as the ones who put the ingredients on the front. However, the packaging is super engaging. It's no nonsense and it's matter of fact. They've taken a stance and they've run with it. Color is another interesting one in the context of clean label. When the massive increase in production of natural, vegan-free, free-from products, the market has been saturated with natural colors and shades that are a lot more muted or a bit more wholesome. The challenge here is using a color palette that builds memorability in the product, but also communicates its naturalness and stands out and disrupt. Sounds like a lot of things to do. In my opinion, whilst the colour palette needs to be indicative of the naturalness of the product and should avoid synthetic or neon colours, the opportunity here is to have something that stands out and that's memorable whilst not compromising the message of the product. I always talk about owning a colour, and with our packaging, we always try to own a colour. And the power of that. Can anybody tell me these brands here? The power of owning a colour, following the 12-foot, 6-foot, 1-foot rule, and having that brand block. All of these assets come together to make a really compelling story. Yes, Cadbury's. Jasmine, you're right. Anyone know any of the others? Harrods, interesting. Heinz, yes. It's interesting. Everyone would have said Heinz previously. Heinz previously, but now Deliveroo has come out and disrupted that, which is really interesting because it's a similar tone, but Deliveroo is a little bit brighter. So we've got Heinz, we've got Cadbury's. There's two in the middle there that we're missing. I'm going to plow on ahead. We've got Dunkin' Donuts and we've got Starbucks. And Raquel got in there a bit late, but I'm suspicious that perhaps you saw that first. Another example of using colour in an interesting way is McDonald's. McDonald's were under pressure to be more sustainable and to change the inner workings of their business. They responded by doing this, but how did they choose to communicate this publicly? Well, they did that by doing something massive in changing a core brand colour. And this was used to signify their pivot and change as a business, moving from this bright synthetic red to this more natural feeling green. Another element that's really important on pack to communicate clean label is imagery. Imagery can be used to negate the stigma that something clean isn't necessarily tasty. Well-shot product photography can show appetite appeal of a clean product that isn't just a cardboard alternative. For example, Impossible Burgers use product shots to show how delicious the burger looks, just like the meat one. It goes without saying that we can also use illustration, for example, or if your product looks delicious, have a cut through so that you can see the actual real product, be proud of it and show it off. A great example of this is Root Health. They combine rich foodie colours with hyper-real imagery to help create appetite appeal. You can see that the use of raw ingredients on the front of pack help to immediately communicate and highlight quality and taste. The colour of the packaging are bold, yet not unnatural, and help the packaging to stand out with appeal. Also showing mouths. I'm not saying we should all show mouths on packs because Root Health own that, but it just makes it super appetizing. So we've spoken about the 6-foot and the 12-foot. Now I want to dig in a little bit deeper and talk about iconography. This is where we can help address the challenge I talked about earlier about how to communicate the benefit of clean label ingredients in the eyes of the customer on a more conscious level. To date, I've been talking about communicating this on a more subconscious level. Here we need to take the consumer on a journey across the pack, making sure they follow the order we would like them to read the visual information in. Studies have shown that consumers' eyes move from the top left of your pack to the bottom right of your pack. And I've seen these tests happen with these set up market research shopping centres where they track the journey that your eye goes on. It's no coincidence that the umbrella brand logos like your Walls heart mark here sits in the top left on the pack, with the key benefits or nutritional information sitting in the bottom right. This is how your consumer journey on pack works, so the hierarchy must follow it. Going back to Eden here, iconography that aligns with the wider brand can help here and give you more ownability than just using a standard traffic light system. With Eden, a challenge was to communicate that the product was steamed rather than fried, that it was vegan, and that the product constituted of 1 of your 5 a day. Doing this with copy wouldn't have been as impactful, so we used iconography that sat on the side and the front of pack and clearly showed those benefits in a branded way. Another great example of communicating these benefits through tone of voice and illustration is Oatly. Combining all of the above translates to having real shelf shout. Creating a pack that shouts from the shelf, which is shelf shout, and stands out against your competitors and causes disruption. So a recap on the elements that we need to consider in order to really communicate the benefits and the value in clean label is firstly to get our brand block right so people remember to come back to us. Then communicating we are clean label, but we also taste bloody brilliant. So getting appetite appeal right. Using the tone of voice to engage the customer, make them feel part of a conversation. Using color to differentiate yourself and also to communicate natural qualities that you are real food. Imagery will serve a similar purpose. And lastly, using iconography on a more conscious level to communicate the benefits of the product. Then we go into number 4, which is brand activation. Clearly, not all selling can be or needs to be on pack. I love the power of this now famous Moldy Whopper campaign. It clearly shows that the product is cleaner than perhaps was perceived prior. It boldly shows the product getting moldy over time, as any natural product should. It's real food, even though some people previously may have doubted that. So in conclusion, I've touched on some of the challenges that face clean label brands in the context of design and communication. The opportunity here is to use your clean label ingredients to challenge and to disrupt. And how do we do this? So to recap is 1, get your brand strategy right, communicating brand values and story and living by them. 2, get your brand packaging right, upping the communication of taste appeal through powerful packaging and talking about clean label features and benefits in a digestible way, no pun intended, is super important. And 3rd, brand activation, building followership from consumers who want to contribute to something bigger than themselves. Know that it's good for all, that's ethical, and that's sustainable. Making your brand stand out from the sea of sameness by doing something different and disrupted to challenge the norm. So in conclusion, well, I've already said in conclusion, but that's me. As Audrey mentioned earlier, I'd be happy to continue this conversation on brand strategy, design and activation with either yourself or any of your teams. If you're interested, drop us a line.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Suffer for those guessing games. I love it. Thank you so much.
Not at all. Cheers, Audrey.